Hello, welcome back to a new episode of the Knit Yorker podcast. I'm Magali. I don't think I have introduced myself in other videos. Today, we have a lot of things to talk about, mostly messages that other people have sent me about knitting tools. And before I get into that, as always, I want to tell you a little bit of what I've been working on and what I'm wearing today. So today, I'm wearing the Ribblesdale vest. I can never say that right. The Ribblesdale vest, which is a pattern by Jolie House. And I talked about this one in a couple podcasts ago. I was working on it. It's a vest that it was kind of like a stash busting project for me. I wanted to finish up this skein and a half of Barocco vintage that I had, and I thought it was gonna be enough, but I quickly discovered that it was not enough. I had to buy another skein, and it was almost exactly the amount of yarn that I needed. I don't know. I guess I just didn't calculate right at all, or I just thought I had more than I actually did have. Maybe it wasn't quite a half. But anyway, I finished it, and I've been trying to find ways to wear it because honestly, I realized that, with the pandemic coming by, a lot of the clothes that I used to have, I either got rid of or gave away, or I doesn't fit me anymore. And so I've been trying to find like new ways of wearing clothes that I already have and find items in my closet that fit with new things that I've acquired or that I've made. And in this case, I just have not found a blouse that quite fits this vest. So I've been wearing it with this black turtleneck. I think it looks okay. I don't know. I still want to find the right blouse for it. If anyone has recommendations, please go ahead. But I do really like the vest, especially wearing it now that it's been getting a little colder here in New York. And sometimes I've been wearing my big, puffy jacket. A few days last week was really cold. So when wearing that type of jacket, I find that wearing a sweater with sleeves just makes everything feel very uncomfortable and don't quite fit into the jacket anymore, and then you get hotter. So a vest or just some kind of item without sleeves is quite useful, I find, and easy to put on and off, even if it doesn't go with my outfit at the moment. So that's how I've been thinking about this vest. And I don't know, it's a quite a nice pattern. I did end up going with the buttons that people recommended in my stories. If you were following me and saw that, I was asking whether these buttons worked, and I think they do. So I've been enjoying this vest. Now, in terms of what I'm making, I know it's just November. In fact, it's probably a little late to start, but I just started my Christmas knitting a few weeks ago. I mostly am making a few things for my family and friends. It's small things, but because I'm making several of some of them, I have been trying to kind of pick up the pace and getting to knitting. So I think everything I'm making right now is not for me, which is, it's usually what happens when I get to this time of year. I've been working on a scarf, which is kind of my biggest yet easiest project because it's, just the same pattern on and off. This is the mini herringbone, is that how to call it? Mini herringbone scarf. It's a pattern by Pearl Soho. It's a free pattern. A lot of my patterns are coming from free patterns just because, I don't trying to keep it simple, and they tend to be free patterns for whatever reason. It's just a scarf, very simple, classic, elegant. Because I wanted to make a scarf for this gift. I wanted to pick something that was easy but that looked nice, and because I know I'm going to be needing this for a while, so I wanted it to at least look really nice. Another pattern that I've been knitting, and I don't have it right here with me, but they are some wool themed or cacti themed wool made plants. Some cacti that I am knitting just to gift as houseplants to some people that like houseplants or need more decorations, in my opinion, but probably cannot invest in houseplants. Kind of like a little cute gift that I want to give to a couple people. It's another free pattern, actually. I will put the link in the bio, or not in the bio, but I'll put the link in the description. But it's a free pattern by Lucille Randall, and it comes with 3 different versions of this cactus. So I'm making a few of them. Another little one that I'm making a few of. This is actually a little crochet pig. They're so cute. I'm gonna make a few of these to gift. There's a reason why it's a pig, and don't question it. I'm just making a bunch of pigs. And then the last thing that I'm knitting also as a gift is going to be the Kutar, and hopefully I said that right. The Kutar top by Luna Knit. And literally, I just started making the swatch. Like, it's not even, I winded the yarn and I'm making the swatch, so I have nothing to show for it yet. But this is gonna be a cute top. And I am using the yarn that I bought in Montreal earlier this year. If you've been following my podcast, so that's exciting. It's gonna be more of a summery type of knit, but it's for someone who lives in a warmer climate, so it makes sense in my head. So that's what I've been knitting. Quite a few projects. I went from not having that many and working on a lot on my Halloween sewing and other projects, Halloween projects in general. If you watched my Bride of Frankenstein video earlier this past month, I was busy on that, so I hadn't had a lot of time for knitting. And now that that's over with and I have a lot of knitting to do, I've been quite busy at it. And I am also designing something new. I can't quite show you yet, or because I don't have much to show yet. The beginning of the designing phase is a lot of thinking and a lot of doing math, so I am in that stage, but I am excited because it's gonna be a spring pattern and I have all the winter to think about it. So stay tuned for that. Anyway, to today's podcast topic, I wanted to talk about knitting tools in general and outside of needles, because I thought it would be an interesting conversation for both knitters, advanced knitters that have been doing it for a while, and to get their opinions and what they think are the best tools that are out there, and that might not be the most obvious ones for also those more beginner knitters that may be starting out. And I feel like when you start out, you probably feel very overwhelmed by all the options, not just in patterns and yarn, but just in general, anything knitting related. You can walk into a knitting store and people will be very helpful, but sometimes you just don't even know what to buy, where to start, what it even is. A lot of these things, I have friends that look at some of my knitting tools and they're like, what is that space gadget that you have? So I thought I'd touch on some of the most useful ones and recommendations, both for me and for my community. So of course, as other topics I've done in the past, I put out a question to everyone on Instagram and ask, what are your favorite needles, not needle related tools for knitting, that you would recommend, especially to someone starting out? And I got some cool responses, and then I want to tell you what I think. But I gotta say that just from these responses, and I'll show them on the screen, but a lot of people agree that stitch markers are the most important tool that you can ever have. And if you don't know what a stitch marker is, it really can be anything. They are something to hold a spot on your knitting. It could be something to mark progress, for example. Progress markers, they call them too. Stitch markers can be holding on to your knitting and then help you track how many rows you've done. Stitch markers can help you track in between stitches, so they, as you knit, you have them in there and they help you count, or sometimes the patterns ask for you to use them so that you remember a certain position or a certain something in your pattern. Stitch markers can be pear-shaped. They can be opened or unopened, like that are completely closed, and you just put them in your knitting as you go. Or they can have hooks so that you can take them on and off. They can help mark the beginning of a round, for example, on projects that are being knit in the round. Stitch markers are just so versatile and so needed, and most importantly, very cute. They can be very simple. They can just be like a circle or, like a round ring that has literally nothing on it, or they could have cute things hanging from it. And I can show you some of my favorite stitch markers that I have later. But from all these responses, everybody, or most everyone, at least mentioned stitch markers, so I wanted to give them a special introduction. Someone specifically said pear-shaped stitch markers were a game changer for me. I remember when I first started knitting, and Or again, I had no one to guide me. I was completely self-taught. So what I did was I went on Amazon and I ordered like this knitting kit that it was a little plastic box that came with random things in it, including stitch markers and other things. And I didn't even know what most of them were. And eventually I figured out what the purpose of most of those tools are. But, you know, as time went on and I was either gifted or bought more stitch markers, I found kind of like the joy of the different shapes and the different kinds and the different things that you could do with them. So I know that pear-shaped stitch markers are probably being mentioned because they're the kind that you can take off or on or put on your knitting or move around easier because they open, kind of like a little safety pin, but more special. So I wanted to give that a special shout out. A couple of other people mentioned this tool that I actually don't have, but I kind of wish I did. A gauge ruler, which is a square, and the void in the middle is for 10 centimeters, 4 inches. So a gauge ruler, it's basically like a square ruler that allows you to count your gauge easier. I don't have this, like I said, but I can see why it would be useful. And I don't really know that I would recommend that as something that I would absolutely have, because another suggestion was a measuring tape. And measuring tapes are just so much simpler and available and versatile. You can use them to measure yourself, or you can use it to measure your project, and you can use them to measure your gauge. I feel like the square 4-inch gauge ruler is cute, but it's only for one use, and you know, it's like a nice to have, but a must for me would be the measuring tape. Definitely the measuring tape. Another person suggested, and I don't know the name for this either, but she called it the thing that measures your needle girth so you can figure out the needle size. And this is the thing that I wish I had. I said I had, and I confused it with the gauge square ruler. I also don't know what they're called. If anyone knows what those are called, please let me know. But basically, the difference with this one is that it also kind of looks like a square type of ruler, but it has circles in it, and all the different circles show you the different size of needles. These are especially useful when you have old types of needles or worn out needles and you don't remember what size they are. And they could even be useful, I feel like, for crochet hooks that just all you do is put your stitch through the holes and kind of figure out which one is the right size. And that way, again, if for some reason you don't remember or can't figure out what the size of your needle is anymore, this is a way to do it. I don't have one of those, but I want one. So if anyone has a good suggestion, a lot of Etsy shops sell this kind of tool, I think. So I'm sure I could find one, but that one is a useful one. Someone else mentioned a decent mini project bag, and they recommend the Tom Bin sacks. I agree, actually. I think project bags, at first, I didn't feel like I needed one because I could just use one of my millions of totes that I have, especially if you have a tote that has a zipper, and that basically can be a project bag. But then I started discovering all the different types of project bags that exist. I actually have a project bag that was gifted to me that goes on your wrist, and it's small, kind of looks like a pencil case, but it's a little wider, and it has a loop that goes around your wrist so that you can knit while walking, which I can never walk and knit, but I do use it for sitting on the subway, so that way my yarn's not gonna bounce off of my bag and roll around. In general, having a good or several good project bags is useful for when you are a chronic cast on person where you have several work in progress projects and they're just like everywhere. It's nice to keep them separate. I do have 2 or 3, some of them gifted, some of them bought, some of them, I know I have never made one actually. I'm lying. They're all either gifted or bought. But yes, project bags or project basket / container. If you have another way of keeping your projects, I personally have a basket, and I also have a mud living bag that was gifted to me by Mud. It's really cute, and it opens up completely so that you can kind of fit whatever size project you have in it. I love those because it's more sturdy than just like a fabric bag, so it fits a lot more and looks nicer. I'm all for making things look nice, but you can just use any kind of basket too. um the problem is like things can get a little messy in baskets, so maybe you need a basket with bags. I don't know, but definitely find a way of organizing your projects that works best for you. And sometimes project bags is just the simplest and the best option. Someone else mentioned three things that I think are more than good to have, but something that if you get serious into knitting, like if you're just starting out, you just need stitch markers. If you get really into knitting, you're gonna need these three things. The first one is a yarn bowl. So this is what a yarn bowl looks like. This is mine. It's a simple wooden bowl, and you see this in yarn stores a lot. And might have thought about why you even have this. Yarn bowls are not just nice decorative and another way of holding your projects, but they're also a way of when you have yarn that is not being pulled from the center or even pulled from the center, that you can pull your yarn in the ball and pull the yarn and it won't roll around, jump around, fall off, things that have happened to all of us. It's really just a way of containing it. It has this nice little loop so that you can put your yarn in it and not, again, pull it out of the ball. This was a very simple one and it was gifted. But I've had others, and there's a lot of artists that make these. So again, a lot of options for supporting small yarn stores. The cool things about these tools is that it's something that you can gift a knitter, even if you don't knit yourself or if you're not that serious into knitting, but you know someone that is, without gifting them yarn, which can be like a dangerous choice if you don't know exactly what yarn people want or how much quantity. Sometimes it's best to give them tools. So a yarn bowl is always something that a knitter is going to be happy to be gifted, and very functional too. And then the other two things that are mentioned here are a winder and a swift. I remember when I was starting to learn to knit, I didn't know what these things were. I had seen them a few times in yarn stores. They looked just alien to me. One of them looked like an umbrella without an umbrella, like just the inside of the umbrella. And the other one, I don't know. I don't think I even noticed it. If you don't know what those are, you probably have seen that sometimes your yarn comes in hanks that are twisted. This is so that the yarn will not be as it won't have too much tension and it won't be pulled. Basically, it's like the most gentlest way of giving you your yarn. Sometimes when you buy more like crafty yarn or like cheaper yarn, it is in these balls, and which work as well. But the hanks are like the way that a lot of indie yarn dyers and just in general like yarn companies tend to give you your yarn. But when I first bought my first yarn that came in a hank, I remember I made the huge mistake of not understanding why it came that way and that I had to wind it before I started to use it. And so I just started pulling off of it like without doing anything. I think I just undid the twist and started pulling off of it. And very quickly I learned why you don't do that. and I it just became a mess. It tangled up immediately, and it was super light fingering yarn, so it was a nightmare to untangle. I did finish untangling, and I made a beautiful shawl with it that I gifted to my mom that she still wears and loves, and it's a really nice alpaca yarn. But I will never forget the madness of untangling that yarn and how I was googling like, why did this happen, what did I do wrong? And sure enough, I learned that you have to wind your yarn, basically make it into a ball like this, so that you're able to actually use it without it tangling all up. But this type of ball also will create more tension on your yarn, and in the long run won't be good for it. So you shouldn't wind it as soon as you get it, but as only when you're ready to use it. So that's another thing that I learned. Not that I ever did it, but at some point I saw some people online that were winding all of their yarn and putting it on a wall, and it looked really nice. But then quickly I learned that you're not supposed to do that. So I don't do it. But to wind a yarn, basically you need two things. You need a winder and you need a swift. So the winder is that funny little hank thing that you turn, and as it goes around, it like starts winding the yarn, and it makes it into this perfect round bowl of winded yarn. So the swift, what it does is basically it holds the yarn for you. It keeps it at a like a equal position in a way, and rotates while you rotate the other hank and make it into a ball. I probably can find a video for you and show you. And if anyone watching this has no idea how to wind your own yarn, I could make a tutorial. I feel like everyone I'm talking to, probably I'm preaching to the choir, but if anyone watching has never done this or had no idea that you were supposed to do that, or had only ever winded your yarn by hand, which is what I did after I learned from my horrible mistake of making a tangled mess of that yarn. I didn't have one, and I was like, I don't need that. I can just do it myself. And I learned that there are ways to do it by hand. You can put it on a chair instead of on a swift, and you can do it with your hands. Of course, takes a lot longer. It's a lot more tiring. So it didn't take me long to buy my swift and my winder, and I've had them ever since. Once even my winder broke one time. It wasn't winding correctly, and I had to fix it, and it was so scary, and I almost bought a new one, but I persevere, and I fixed it. My swift and my winder are from Knit Picks specifically. There's tons, and there's different kinds of them too that look different. So that is something that I would say as a beginner, if you've only just learning and you're only just bought yarn that you need to wind and maybe not that much, you can do it by hand at first and see how you get into it. But as you start collecting buying more yarn for projects and more of the yarn that comes in hanks, you might want to invest into a swift and a winder. Like I said, I have had mine for, I don't know, 7 years, a really long time. So definitely keep it in mind if as a very, very useful pair of tools that you can have. Thank you for suggesting it. I guess the only other thing that is not everyone talking about stitch markers is those flexible cords, for sure, so much better than waste yarn. I've actually have not tried these before, and I am very interested in trying them. If you don't know what this person's talking about, because she's also not naming them, and I don't know what they're called either, but let's Google it. Okay, so it doesn't seem like there's a specific name. They just call them cords. They can also be called stitch holders. So basically what they are, and I really want some of this, they're this plastic, I think, or some type of wire, plastic cover wire, similar to what comes with circular needles. And they come in different sizes, and they usually have something at the end to kind of hold that end. And those are used as an alternative to waste yarn. Sometimes when you're knitting projects, especially projects in the round or projects that are garments or something bigger that you're gonna want to try on, or that have separate parts that need to be held separately as you knit another part of the pattern, the pattern is gonna ask you to use waste yarn to hold the stitches as you work on something else, or if you want to try it on. If you've ever tried to put on a sweater as you're knitting it, and even with the very long knitting circular needle, sometimes it just won't stay. There's just not enough space for you to try it on, to putting over your head and do all of that. So with these wires, basically you can replace them instead of your knitting needle, and gives you more freedom to try things on or to just hold your stitches. Like I said, I have been using waste yarn for all of this for a while because I don't have them. But every time I get to that point is when I go, oh, I should just buy some of these. I really should just get them. This is a tool that probably more advanced knitters are gonna get into more than beginner knitters, but it's definitely something to keep in mind as you find alternatives to how to hold your stitches, because there are also some stitch holders that kind of look like this giant safety pins, and those work okay, but these ones are flexible and they make it a lot more useful. Again, I've seen so many different names. I see them as knit keeper cord, knitting barber cord, stitch wire. It has different names. They're very inexpensive and they're basically like silicone or plastic covered wires. So definitely worth exploring, and like I said, I kind of need some myself that I don't have. So that's what everybody suggested. I found it very interesting, again, because I learned that there are some tools that I don't use but should probably use or have wanted to try. There are also things that some more beginner knitters might not want to try, and some things that I think they definitely should, like the stitch markers. Some other things that were not mentioned and I would like to mention myself are, well, I did say other than needles, but I will somehow plug in circular needles if you've never used one. So circular needles, you've probably seen a lot in my channel because I only use circular needles. Sometimes I will point needles, but I am a big circular needle fan. Especially these type, which are interchangeable, which means you have a cable and then you can screw on and off different size needles. They are very useful for exchanging cable sizes, for having several projects going on at the same time, sometimes even using the same needle size and just changing it around, for going from one needle size to the next one, for holding a project, even if you're kneading flat. It's just so much more secure, less likely to come off, and they are so portable. You can just fold them around, and it's so much easier to put this in your bag or in your project bag and carry it around with you and knit in other places other than home, which I love to do myself. I like to bring my knitting with me everywhere I go, and circular needles are just the way to go. I could never go back to knitting with straight needles. I feel like the only place I ever see straight needles being used are in movies, because it's what everybody pictures when they think of knitting. But in reality, everyone I know at least knits with circular needles. So much more useful. They're the best. And I know I said no needles, but circular needles, they get their special mention. If you've never used them, what are you waiting for? The ones that I specifically use are from Knitpicks too, but there are some other really nice ones from other brands. If you'd like to suggest what are your favorite circular needles or interchangeable circular needles, please post them in the comments so that people can find them. And the other thing that I would suggest, even as you're starting out, are blocking materials. So as we know, or you may not know, blocking is really the last step in knitting as you're done and right before you wear it. It's what creates even tension in your knitting, and it just gives it that finished look that it really like makes especially garments come to life and be in the right size and the right look. And I use knitting blocking panels, I guess you could call them. They kind of look like the ones that kids use for like foam panels that sometimes are used for kids' bedrooms or for playing. And you could actually use those, the ones for kids, if they're cheaper. But all they are foam blocks that can be kind of put together in different sizes and shapes. And they are so useful, especially even in a small apartment. I have 2 sets of blocking mats. Blocking mats, that's the problem. I don't know why I was calling them panels. I guess you can call them panels, you can call them mats, but I prefer them from other kinds of mats because it's very easy to pull them apart and put them back together and shove them in a corner, and they don't take up much space. And it's so easy to block with them. And then other than that, you just need pins. There are blocking pins, and there's some really cool ones that I don't own, but I've seen before, where it's like a block with needles on it, and that helps you keep specific shapes. I use the regular T-pins, which I think it was what I first bought and what I'm used to. Some people also use blocking wires, which are basically a more stiff wire that you can use to create a shape and keep it in place on your blocking mats. Whatever tool you best like, I definitely recommend having some sort of tool for blocking. I used to, when I first started and I first learned about blocking, I used to just use a towel, and believe me, it is not the same. It is not the same. You can't pin to it as easily. It stays wet, whereas the blocking mats dry faster. I don't know. I think it's something worth. If you're serious about knitting and you've been making garments, I would 100% suggest getting blocking mats, or considering getting blocking mats or some other blocking materials to get your blocking done. And finally, last but definitely not least on my recommended knitting tools are knitting blockers. I'm gonna show you some of my favorite ones. So knitting blockers, these basically just look like a cute little plastic things. But what they do, and the reason they're useful, is that they go at the end of your needles, and they kind of hold the project in place, so that if the stitches accidentally come to the end of your needle and would fall off, which happens especially with double pointed needles and socks, it happens to me all the time, these little guys help you keep it in place, and they also make your project look very cute. The ones that I have are all from Needles and Life, my friend Kaylee, who sells these on her Etsy shop. My favorite ones are the Halloween themed ones, of course. And, they really are something so simple and so cute, but so very useful. And I definitely use them a lot when I'm going to be traveling and I'm afraid of losing stitches as I pull my project in and out of bags, a bag within a bag within a bag. So that's another cheap, simple, easy way and cute way of keeping a tool and keeping your knitting in place. So those are my knitting tool suggestions for the day. I would love to hear if you have anything else that you think it would be super useful for someone to suggest, or that you use a lot. And I would like to leave you with some of my favorite stitch markers. I have a lot of Doctor Who themed stitch markers, like this one. This is a little tortoise. I feel like stitch markers are like the closest to jewelry that knitting gets, other than something to hold your shawl in, like one of those shawl pins. That the cool thing about the stitch markers is that you can use them over and over in different projects, right? So I also have this little progress marker that is a tea bag. It has a little tea bag. I think this one was a gift. I love this one. I have all these little pine cone ones that I usually use as my beginning of round markers. I always know if it's a stitch marker with a little cone, that is my beginning of round marker. What else? I've got a little unicorn. I also love to see how people keep their stitch markers in different, like how do they keep them. I have them in this little dish that it's a Christmas type of dish, but I use it all year long. And then last one, and probably one of my favorites, is another Doctor Who themed one. A stitch marker Dalek. Anyway, I leave you with that. I hope you enjoyed this podcast and show me some of your favorite stitch markers. Show me some of your favorite tools. And I'll see you on the next one. Happy knitting!